Okay guys, I got another video. Just went through my messages and had a personal message from a gentleman by the name of sae1095hc. So SAE1095hc. He doesn't have any videos or anything like that, but he asked a pretty good question, and I just kind of wanted to do this video to help him out. He basically says, let's see here. I was wondering if you can help me with a probable future purchase. Money is pretty tight, so I can't buy a bunch of knives to compare, and I don't live close to a good knife store to compare in person. After watching Solo's knife reviews vid on the Carrie Hampton back pocket knife, I've been looking for a close analog. The GEC number 73 seems to be a good fit for my needs. The thing is I want the knife to be as thin as possible with as much utility as I can get. The stag scales appear to be much or a lot thicker than the cheaper scales, so they're out. They are out. My main questions are the liner lock single blade knives almost as thin as regular single blade scouts, and are wood handles any thinner than jig bone or smooth bone handles? So thanks for that question. It's kind of difficult for me to really necessarily answer this. I know that you want to really kind of get into something. By the sounds of it, is you really like the stag scales, which I do too. Uh, typically, back pocket knives usually have really thin scales. Um, Sometimes a thinner blade. This one has a pretty decent sized blade, um, but it's generally flatter, a lot flatter. Usually when you get into stag scales, the only way that stag really works very well and why people appreciate it is because of its thickness. So here's a little comparison, as you can see. Now here's a sac, or a Victorinox sac, Victorinox, the Solo, I'm sorry. This is the Solo. It's a single blade, very, very nice and thin. So here's a comparison between, I don't know if I ever did a video on it, but between one of their ones that's got, utility blades and, screwdrivers and stuff. So here's this, and as far as comparison size, in comparison to the Tony Bose back pocket, there's your thickness as far as that. Let's see here, and there's the blade comparison. Now this one's full flat as well as this one is. You're having a tendency to end up getting a pretty long blade with the Tony Bose. I believe it's about a little over 3.5 inches. I think it's actually like 3 3/4 inches long. And let me just measure this out here real quick. Sorry guys. It is actually 3.5 inches long. The actual cutting surface is just slightly over 3 1/4 inches. Let me see here. As far as, depending upon the utility that you want to use the blade for, it has a lot of stuff to do with it. So one thing that you got to know about is the fact that you are going to have, the slippiness to it. I mean, it's going to be able to move around a lot on you and whatnot. But as you can see, this is a fairly easy blade to close. Okay, I can't do that with my A-locks. I can't close this puppy one-handed. It does have a tendency to slip in my fingers a little bit. Okay, so I can, but that is a lot more pressure to try and close this one than it is on this one. It's much, much harder. Now you get into, here's the one with the lock back on the GEC, and then here's one that's got the liner lock. Okay, now I've seen Doggo running, I've seen him actually close this one-handed, whereas I don't care to necessarily try it considering it is a right-handed closing locking blade. But for reference, I mean, these things are super hard to close. They are bear traps. Those back springs are huge. You know, I mean, the back spring on this puppy is just about as big as the Tony Bow's entire knife, pretty much. But very strong back springs. I don't know how they make them so much tighter than the case ones, but for the money that you're paying for this, you're paying for the name. This is kind of in reference to one of my other videos, just discussion. You're paying for the name. You're paying for Tony Bow's putting his name on this, as far as they merely used his design of his back pocket. That's all they did. This one wasn't, you know, inspected by Tony Bow's, or, you know, I don't know. He basically gave them the design of his back pocket that he had created and done by hand. Now, it's got a decent half stop. It's got a decent lockup, but to tell you the truth, I mean, can you guys hear that? Not a super strong back spring. Whereas you take the Victorinox Solo, super good lockup, much harder to close. This puppy is very, very light, as you can see. It's got a good half stop, you know, but it's not a super strong spring. You know, it's if you're using your thumb on the back, you're gonna have, you know, pretty much. That's how easy that is to push. That one's a lot more difficult to push, and I'm having to go a lot higher on the blade, whereas this one, I don't have to go that high on the blade to get it to push. These guys, on the other hand, let's take a GEC EDC knife, is pretty easy. But you take one of these guys, and this one's fairly easy too, but it's a lot harder. It's not gonna snap on you as easy. This is the half Stockman, and it's fairly thin. You will notice it in your pocket because it's not quite as wide. Typically these back pockets are usually in the 4-inch range, so that they fit the entire width of your pocket as it sinks down into the pocket. So that way it doesn't have a whole lot of room. It doesn't have room to roll. As part of the reason that was explained to me as towards the way that these were designed, so that it sits down into your pocket. It doesn't have a whole lot of room to try and tumble over. They're nice and thick, whereas you've got this little guy, he's going to want to roll around inside of your pocket. You know, you could end up having it kind of tumble over inside of your pocket, and you could end up sitting on this, and that's not going to feel too good going into your butt cheek. But as far as thickness with a lot of these, I mean, you're going to notice some differences. Would I throw this in my back pocket? Depends. If I was, you know, doing my job, working around all day, probably not, because I'm constantly in and out of, you know, in and out of a truck. Whereas you got knives like these, much thicker. The bigger that you go, it's always going to get a lot thicker. So would I suggest one of these? No. This is the 23 model. This is basically the 73 model, a little bit different, but still pretty much the same basic type of frame. I'm sorry I didn't grab my other ones that are the actual 73 frames with the 2 blades, because I know those will be thicker. But as far as heavy utility, I would have no doubt that this would serve you best. I mean, it's not necessarily as pretty as these, but depending upon what you're planning on spending, what you want to use it on, I mean, you really can't go wrong with this. It's got good grip inside of the hand. It feels smooth. but when you put some pressure to it, those little tiny bead-like things do add traction. Have I used it while my hands are wet to see, if they're gonna, provide less traction? No. But with wood scales, um, you know, you're getting basically the same type of traction. Does look a little bit better, but all in all, this thing's probably going to cost you 85, 90 bucks shipped. I told you they've got them for 75 to 79 on eBay. But then you also have to pay your shipping. So if you're getting them with free shipping, then cool. But these puppies are what, 35 bucks if you can find one, maybe even cheaper. So you could actually get 2 of these and you could use them. And they're thinner than the back pocket. If you're wanting a full-size blade, for whatever your daily use is going to be on this thing, you're running into a whole lot more blade. So the chances of you breaking it are going to be a little bit better than a smaller blade, in my opinion, if you're getting the same size thickness, which these are both pretty much same size thickness. I think the Alox actually has a beat on the Tony bows a little bit, and it's thinner. It's lighter in weight. You will notice this a little bit more in the pocket, but not by much, because this is fairly light. When you go get up to something like this, it is going to be a little bit heavier, just because the materials, I think the thickness of the materials, the blade thickness it's kind of hard to see, but it is a little bit thicker, if I'm not mistaken. It looks like it to me, but I could be mistaken. That guy has a thinner blade. It all just is based off of what you want to use it for, what your purpose for it is. The back pockets, they're designed to fit in your back pocket to not move around all that much. They're flat, so they'll ride better, and you could get in and out without tearing up your pocket as much. But if you want a smaller utility, I wouldn't think that this would be a bad back pocket knife. It's close to the same thickness. It's not, doesn't have a whole lot on it. Maybe an 1/16 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch, maybe. You get 2 blades with it. You get a smaller blade like this, and then you get a penknife. So you've got 2 different utility blades, so that's a bonus. But once again, this right here, if you want stag handles, you're looking at paying 100 bucks plus. So I don't know, it all depends upon your preference. You could always go onto eBay, find smaller knives like this one that I absolutely love. This is definitely thinner. This is a gentleman knife. It's basically a pen knife. And you can find decent ones that are older or newer. You could get, a lot of companies make these pen knives. So it's typically about a 3-inch handle, and you'll generally have about a 2-inch blade. Definitely fits well in the hand. It's a good user. Now if you've got bigger hands, that may not work for you. I've got huge hands, but I also like littler knives, so it all just depends. I also like real big knives. I like knives that fit the hand real well and have some, weight to them. Materials. Wood is generally going to cost you around the same as a bone handle. Depending upon what kind of bone handle you get, it's going to be cheaper. If you get into celluloid, it's definitely going to be a lot cheaper. It's going to save you a lot of money. So it all depends upon your price range, what type of materials you want. If I'm not mistaken, this is a stainless steel. It's probably you know, a stainless steel. It's the exact same thing that this uses. Maybe different heat treat, I don't know, but this thing's really not gonna do you any worse off. You might have to sharpen it more often, I don't know, but I know you're gonna probably have to sharpen one of these up. If you want something to look better and something to show off to friends, then get this. But I will tell you right now, the difference in quality, I would have to go with this. Honest, to be honest. One thing that's a little bit better about this is you got, you know, the prettiness of it. You've got a half stop, but it's a relatively weak half stop. I mean, this has a better half stop than this, and this is a cheaper knife. It's a better knife, and well, this is an EDC if you haven't watched my other video, but it's a cheaper knife, it's a better knife, and I'm actually gonna do a part 2 on this because I'm out of time. So thanks for watching, guys, and just look for part 2.